The journal.
Well, this is my daughter's,
I'll make sure she takes them from that trip.
this one you didn't want me to, yeah.
What's up?
Yeah, and our daughter Piper.
Piper, I heard all about you. Keith,
Oh, okay.
this is my niece. Hi, nice to meet you. This is my,
Well, and then we have one more. It's kind of dance. We decided not to pull her out because they were wanted to know.
well, originally, when I said this, he's like, I'm a coaching and you really made it bring. This is a big part.
Okay, that's what I told him. I said there's more important things than soccer.
I love that I'm here, but I'm really upset I'm missing practice right now.
There are more important things than soccer.
They can get you there late, probably.
No, it's like that.
Oh, James can make kids, but.
He doesn't have
High
time.
school season.
Oh, you're up.
Yeah.
We'll probably have you out here 7:20.
No, I love
First
that.
up, so.
I love that.
Uh-oh.
All good things. All good things.
I'm gonna melt it over here. I'll see you.
Cheers.
Hi.
You're the one, no, you're a so.
Yeah.
You're the one with the iPad all the time.
No,
No,
that's seriously doing it.
She's, well,
yeah.
We're addicted to our phones.
You guys got a good
They
day.
start making me leave this one sit down.
Yeah.
She was not ridiculous.
Yes.
No.
Good guy.
For a little while.
Yeah, I would too.
Hi, I'm introduce myself. I'm Barb Schmidt. I work for the co-op there.
With Trevor?
Well, for the whole group, so
Okay.
I'll be looking around. I'm on the PR stuff, so.
Okay.
Trevor texted me and I said, oh, I came from the Utah High School's athletic basketball tournament.
Okay.
We did well. Here. I said, hey. Yeah, so I thought, I'm gonna come check it out. Yeah, so, hey. My brother-in-law's from Cleveland, so.
Well, good. We love it.
Yeah, yeah, that's what, well, that's the name of the junior, that's been for many years a lot.
Come by and say hi.
It helps a lot.
That way you're good.
Well, if there's anything, you know, it's, I keep clear, I should be.
You know, for me, I'm good.
Yeah.
Take care of your
No, I know, but I know. Everything is normal. Yeah, we had a good outcome, everybody was like.
Okay, it is 7:02, and I will call this meeting to order. Welcome, everyone. Appreciate having everybody here, and really appreciate the opportunity here in a minute to recognize many people in the room. But first, we will all stand and do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Rory, will you please call the roll?
Yes. Councilmember Gettle.
Here.
Robinson.
Here.
Glover.
Here.
Sperry.
Here.
And Councilmember Brown is excused.
Thank you, Rory. Chief Thomas, would you like to step up to the mic?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. It's with great pleasure tonight that I think we've kind of packed the council chambers. This is unusually crowded, but what I'd like to do is recognize, first of all, if I could get Lieutenant Ken Malone to come up here with me, my executive officer. And also the Shift Sergeant Supervisor Chad Zitting, if you could come up here, please. And Trevor, I think it'd be appropriate for you to come up here. I do. Mayor and Council, if you don't know Trevor, he is actually the owner and operator of McDonald's restaurant. As you know, we're here tonight to recognize, and this is on your request, those that were involved in the incident that was, I would say, tragic, amazing, and noteworthy. And behalf of, the employees of McDonald's, their training experience and the actions they took upon that day, as well as the crew that responded to that event. And as you know, and as the news has reported, where a gentleman committed aggravated assault on our employees at McDonald's who, through their training and procedures that night or that day, obviously called us, but at the same time staged that individual involved in that to where they couldn't continue or harass the employees of McDonald's. And the responding officers that day found themselves in an incredible and I would say one of the more unusual events, not only for UPD, but nationally, if not globally, where, as you know, as originally it was reported or thought, a 6-year-old pointed a gun at one of our officers or our officers while they were effecting arrest. What we later found out is he's almost 5. And due to the brave and kind of instinctive reactions of Officer Morgan Matthews, while we were effecting an arrest, he saw a gun come out of the vehicle and just as a natural reaction, swiped that gun away right as it was fired. It was being aimed towards our officers as they were effecting the arrest, and thank goodness the bullet went up into the eave of the restaurant itself. Morgan did suffer some slight powder burns on his arm, but more amazingly was his reaction when he recognized the threat, mitigated the threat, and then reacted to the threat, and within a fraction of a second, recognized there were kids in the back of this car. Now, if you'll picture, the car is actually a 2-seater car with no seat in the back seat, and that's where these kids were. So when the officers were actually effecting this arrest, they had no idea there was anyone in the car whatsoever. So when Morgan did recognize that threat, he immediately called out kids and, honestly preventing a very tragic situation from happening. So I'm going to, if you wouldn't mind, I'm going to have Chad Zitting call up his crew one by one so we can somewhat recognize them and save Morgan for last. And then Trevor, we're going to do the same for you when you're done, if you're good with that. Chad?
Yeah, if we could have Detective Lydiard come up. And Detective Clark.
Thank you. I'm sorry that we actually have a gift for everyone too. And so maybe as you come through, we'd like to shake your hands and then we'll hand you those and then you could line up too with that if that makes sense.
Thank you. That works great.
No hugging, just. Go ahead, Trevor.
Officer Lechuga,
Mr.
Officer Lincoln Hooker, Officer Zakino, and Officer Matthews.
Trevor, come on up.
I'm gonna call up the store manager. Everybody's giving credit to the training, but it really needs to fall on Monica Robles. She's kind of the chief cook and bottle washer there. She does an amazing job, outstanding job. And I think many of the officers and folks that she's befriended there at the store can attest to her crew and her friendliness and their friendliness. And I think it's because of the relationship that she's developed with the officers and the people there that they're willing to kind of come to her beck and call. And I think that's what a community is all about. So we appreciate this opportunity, but really the heroes here are Monica and her crew and what they've done and how they reacted and how we can continue to work together as businesses and city officials. And I think it's a perfect example of how that should work. So with that being said, I'm gonna let Monica call up her crew and let them go through the same process.
Okay, so Tiffany Sloan, she was the manager in charge at the time.
She's gonna go the reverse way.
She's more efficient.
That's right.
Thank you. Thank you.
Alexia Moreno, she was also one of the other shift managers. One of my youngest ones.
Alexia, go back and get your assistant. Thank you.
Gladys Zarate, she was the one taking care of the kids at the time, so she was
Yeah, when I first got there, is it Gladys?
Gladys.
Gladys had both kids in her lap. The little girl was asleep and the little boy was having chicken McNuggets. It was great.
And Brian. And he was the one that parked him and kind of convinced him to calm down a little bit and parked him, and so.
Thank you. Brian.
That's
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. If we could all give them a round of applause. We're also going to ask those folks to come up here for a quick photo.
Come on up and get your dip.
What about you want to take
I'm loving it. Thank you.
No, wait, hang on. Now look my way. There you go. 1, 2, 3, all eyes on you.
Others, if you want to take these to them, so let's see, we got Broadhead and Gregory.
Mayor and council, I'd also like to point out that Morgan's family's in the audience too, and he has a great representation from the family.
Thank you.
I just want to quickly reiterate what Chief Thomas said. This is a situation that really could have turned to be much more horrific than it was, and it's thanks to the UPD officers, to the employees at this McDonald's that really made sure that this day that could have been horrific was a much better outcome than what it would have been. And we just commend your efforts, commend your work in this, and really appreciate it. You all are more than welcome to hang out for the rest of the meeting. If you'd like, it's going to be very exciting.
I was like, they're not arrested. They're free to go. All right, let's go. Thank you.
Thank you.
See, if we learn to do those awards at the end of the meeting, right? You could have quite the audience.
Okay, we're going to move on to public comments. Any person wishing to comment on any item not otherwise scheduled for a public hearing on this agenda may address the city council at this point by stepping up to the microphone and presenting their name for the record. Are there any public comments? Seeing none in person. Rory, did we have any comments online? Okay, thank you. Okay, moving into council reports. Council Member Gettle.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to, I'm sure we all will, just echo the gratitude that we have to UPD in handling that situation. You never want to see a McDonald's in your council district trending on Twitter as it was that Saturday morning, but as I learned the events through City Manager Dahl and updates from Chief Thomas, just so grateful that it ended the way that it did and not much worse. So my gratitude to everyone involved in that. Also, I just wanted to last meeting I mentioned the Martha Cannon Hughes, the little traveling, I don't know what to call it. But yeah, so we've narrowed down that it's going to be here for a week in the summertime this year. So that's pretty exciting. They don't have an exact date just yet. And when they do, I'll forward that to City Manager and Kyle to see how you guys want to handle that. So it's really cool. They're going to have a lot of her actual memorabilia, and they're going to be loaning it to different cities and entities across the state. And we were lucky enough to have been chosen to have it for a week. So I think I'll know by the end of next week exactly when they plan to let us have it. That's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Robinson.
I also would just like to echo my gratitude to the employees of McDonald's and the UPD staff for how everything on that situation was handled. But that's all I have tonight.
Thank you. Councilmember Glover.
I would like to also echo that, and it's nice that we have good reports for police to combat all of the negative stuff that's going on, because our police really try hard to do what's right. So I commend them on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Sperry.
Yeah, just to, again, build upon those other comments, and Councilmember Glover just said it's good to have positive recognition. We've had a couple of those already this year with UPD and then our fire and others for what they've done in our city, and thinking, as I had read the article, and then as Chief Thomas related some of the facts tonight, I just remember thinking, the amount of training that they put in for all of this, and how quickly they can respond, because they do have to make those split-second decisions. And in this case, it turned out well that it probably saved a life, right? And unfortunately, we see too often where that's not the case. And so we're glad with Officer Matthews and some of the others that how quick they were responding in the training, that they did that positive thing. So
thank you. Well, for my report, I'll just start by saying I agree with everything that has been said. And again, also want to commend the efforts of the UPD officers as well as the McDonald's employees. I'm really happy to see that most of them were able to make it out here tonight so we could recognize them. I mentioned this in our workshop, but there are many bills that are coming forward this week that will affect our city. One of them being House Bill 440, Homeless Services Amendments. Today, this bill passed out of the House. This was in an original situation that increased the mitigation funding that we are quite thankful for, but would have also potentially required our family shelter here to flex up to 100% fire capacity. And if an overflow was to be placed within the county, potentially put within Midvale. Luckily, after many negotiations over the last week and a half or so, today this bill passed that doesn't require a flex for Midvale and excludes Midvale from being an option for a state-placed overflow shelter. Really appreciate to our city manager, Matt Dahl, for also working really hard on this, and I think we've gotten that bill to a much better place than it was when it started. And that's mine. If you've got anything, Matt.
Sure. Just a couple things. Real quick is just, we have had a request from Representative Ivory to utilize the Dahl Conference Room to do a legislative session wrap-up. It'll actually be this Saturday. I'm going to reach out to all of our legislators to let them know that if they want to do a similar wrap-up utilizing our facilities, we'd be happy to facilitate that so that we're being fair for everyone. But as of right now, he was the only one who's made that request. And then, anyway, so in case you saw that, you knew what was happening. And then the other thing is, just as a reminder, our budget retreat is scheduled for March 31st. And so we, Mariah and Kyle and all of staff have been working hard on the budget, but now we're entering the warp speed phase of that. And we're working on making sure that we have a good retreat that day. And I think with that, that'll be it for me tonight.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next up will be our community development / RDA report from Nate Rockwood.
Hey, Mayor and Council. Really quick, short report. Just a couple of things. We did start, we got a grant from the Wasatch Front Regional Council to do State Street study, and so we've started that with a really good urban design architect firm, MHTN. We're in the gathering phase of that. We did go out and do a tour last week, so the week before that was really warm. This week was really warm. Last week was freezing cold on State Street. It reminded me of being back in Michigan. It was so cold. But we did go and visit a couple of things. But with that project, that is going to have a lot of a zoning sort of emphasis on it. And we've really asked the consultant to really do a lot of community engagement, businesses, residents, visitors, everyone. So there's going to be a really strong push for community engagement on that. So we're looking forward to seeing that and trying out a bunch of different ideas. It's kind of, you know, when we get these individual developments that go up, we hear a lot of complaints about that, but we don't get a lot of participation in putting together a general plan or putting together some of these small area plans. This is sort of a corridor plan of State Street, which really does affect almost everybody in Midvale. So it's a really good opportunity to try out a bunch of different ways to get as much public engagement and business engagement as we can. So we will continue to keep you up to date on that, but we're excited about that project getting started. The other news, just on the RDA, we did make some adjustments to the personnel there, switched around the titles a little bit, and so within the RDA, we have the RDA manager still, but we have project manager. That was the affordable housing manager. They're still going to do affordable housing, but there's going to be some more RDA sort of components to that so that they can get a lot more involved in all the different aspects of the RDA. And we did fill that position, so we have a new employee, Maggie, who's working on that. She comes from sort of the art world, working with the art center downtown. So we'll be training her on affordable housing and on RDA, but we're glad that she's joining our team. The other position is what was called the project manager is now actually called the program manager, and that'll be managing a lot of the different programs we have for Main Street, but also managing a lot of the projects that we have in all three of the RDA areas. And we've promoted, Kate. I don't know how I forgot Kate. So we promoted Kate, who has been my assistant for the last 20 months, and basically does everything for me. But so we're really excited to be able to promote Kate to that position. She's amazing. You've seen her present a lot of different programs that we have in the RDA. She's just an amazing asset for the city, so we're really excited to see her take this role.
Nate,
So
it's way too early for us to already be getting to that stage.
We're talking about RDA stuff, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's all I have to say.
Councilmember Glover wasn't here at the last
I am just really glad that that happened to you because it happens to me all the time now.
Yeah, Nate and Kate is what everyone, I mean, we rhyme. I don't know how I could possibly have done that. She's on vacation, so luckily she's not listening, I hope, right now. Anyways, so now we're working on filling her position. But other than that, any questions from for the RDA or for the community development team? Great, thanks.
Thank you so much. Okay, we're going to move into public hearings. I'll ask for a motion to open the public hearing on item A. Consider approval of the minor subdivision / conditional use to divide property into two lots at 6871 South, 185 East in the single-family residential / duplex overlay SF-1 / DO zone. Is there a motion to open up the public hearing?
Mayor, I motion that we move into a public hearing.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
Any against? Okay, the public hearing is open. We will first hear from Vendaline from Planning.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I hope you can hear me. This project, let me switch the page here, is located north of the East Midvale Elementary School. So you could say it's in the northeastern quadrant of the city. And here's the public notice. It's a simple project. There's an existing home. And you can see that on here with a relatively large backyard. And the petitioner is asking to subdivide the lot into two with the help of our conditional use as a flag lot. A flag lot is basically a lot behind the lot that's existing, and it's accessed with a driveway. We advertised this extensively, like our ordinance requires. There's been a sign at the property and didn't really get any comments. One of the reasons may be that there are already flag lots right in that area, actually immediately south of this project. All the city departments that are involved did their review. The Salt Lake County Surveyor's Office also reviewed the plat, and we found that everything is compliant with the city ordinances and other applicable regulations. And with that, staff recommends approval of the project.
Thank you. Any discussion from the council? Okay, hearing none. This hearing is now open for public comment. If there's anyone who would like to comment on this item? Seeing none, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
Mayor, I move that we close the public hearing.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
Any against? Thank you. The public hearing is now closed. I'll ask for a motion to take action on item A.
Mayor, I move that we recommend approval of the final plat for the Carlson subdivision and conditional use as a flag lot located at 6871 South, 185 East in the single-family residential duplex overlay SF-1/DO zone with the findings noted in the staff report.
Second.
Okay. Motion and second. Any discussion? Okay. Rory, will you call roll?
Yes, Councilmember Sperry,
Aye.
Glover,
Aye.
Robinson.
Aye.
And Gettle.
Yes.
Thank you. That motion passes. Okay, moving on to the consent agenda. Consider minutes of the February 15th, 2022. Is there a motion to accept the consent agenda?
Mayor, I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Second?
Any discussion? Rory, please call roll.
Councilmember Glover,
Aye.
Robinson.
Aye.
Gettle.
Yes.
And Sperry.
Aye.
Motion passes. Okay, moving on to discussion items. Our first item is discuss interlocal agreement with Sandy City for pavement work on Union Park Avenue. Keith.
Good evening, Mayor, council members, esteemed members of senior staff. Sorry, thought I'd drink some water. There must have been something else. You spiked it, didn't you?
Keith?
That's not good.
Thank you, Lisa. I come before you tonight with, I believe, a great opportunity for us. Sandy City is going to do a mill and overlay project on Union Park Avenue, starting at the intersection of South Union and Creek Road, and then heading south into, I believe it's called High Point Parkway, anyway, someplace south in Murray, or Sandy. A portion of Union Park Avenue is within the boundaries of Midvale City. It's the western half of Union Park Avenue at South Union Avenue, and then headed south for a few hundred feet. Sandy City contacted me a few weeks ago and asked if we would like to participate. After reviewing some of the information that they sent over and getting input from senior staff, I accepted their offer. Like I said, I think this is a great opportunity for us. It allows us to take advantage of Sandy doing kind of all the heavy lifting, contracting, contract management, dealing with the contractor, that sort of thing, and we're able to get this section of Union Park Avenue milled and overlaid. I know this has been an ongoing issue with Roland Garcia, as he's been struggling to try to get work done in that area for a while. So this will certainly help out some of the issues that he's been dealing with. The project will be advertised as soon as they possibly can, with the intent, of course, to get this out to bid as early as we can in the spring. They have assured me that we will be involved in their bidding and selection process, so we look forward to that. They have prepared an interlocal agreement which was sent to us. It's been reviewed and approved by our legal department. I will prepare a resolution and bring that back to you for your approval at your next council meeting in a couple of weeks. The estimated cost of this is about just over $35,000 that we have in our current payment management funds, so budget is really not an issue. So any questions or
Keith,
concern.
you did say that there was some issues up there. Will this solve the issues, or are there other things we have to do besides?
No, it's mostly just some potholing, raveling of the asphalt.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure we didn't have to do water work or anything like that.
No, we'll wait until it's overlaid, then we'll come in.
That's what I'm asking.
No, actually, we don't have any water lines. Yeah, we don't have any water lines in that area. I know Cottonwood Improvement District, who services that area for sewer service, actually did an upgrade to some lines in that area, several years ago. So I think we're good.
Okay, and I always ask that question. It's like, every time we do an overlay, somebody wants to rip it back up.
You know, there's something about a nice, freshly, brand-new black road that people just can't resist, I guess. I don't know. But no, we should be good. And, yeah, so like I said, we'll be able to take advantage of a lot of the heavy lifting that Sandy will do and get this portion done, so.
So did we already have, I mean, was this in our management plan, and when would we have been doing it?
In the past, because we share Union Park Avenue either with Sandy at this location and further south or further north of this with Cottonwood Heights. In the past, we've partnered with Cottonwood Heights to do a major project. We did one with them, it's been some years ago. It's still in fairly good shape. This was not on our 3-year mill and overlay project. If at the most, we would probably do a slurry as its next treatment.
Okay.
But if we're still having problems up there, like you said, it's probably a good idea to take care of it now.
Right.
Before it gets worse.
Exactly. And this will make the that project look complete rather than having, you know, the northbound lanes in great condition, the southbound lanes in great condition, except for our little section. So this will make it a, you know, from South Union Avenue south, a complete project. So obviously the prices have gone up. As I was looking at the unit prices, I think our last bid we did a couple years ago, we were getting asphalt for about $1.15 a square foot. These prices are about $1.88, which quite frankly, I thought were not as much as I was expecting with the way everything has been going. But anyway, like I said, I think this is a great opportunity, and I'll have a resolution for you in a couple of weeks to take action on.
Any other questions or comments for Keith? Thank you.
Cool. Thanks. Thanks, Lisa.
Okay. Item B, discuss Midvale Harvest Days 2022.
Oops. So that is the right one. Juan did good. I did not. There is a slide on there that wasn't intended to be on there. Anyway, so what I want to talk about this evening is that as we have looked at the history of Harvest Days from the beginning, there have been a lot of changes with the event. Whether that's how long is the event, what days does the event take place on, what is the schedule of the event, who's in charge of the event, how much are we contributing, any number of things have changed over time to the point where we are now. And so over the course of the last couple of years, I've heard from different council members suggestions of ways that they thought that we could make some changes to Harvest Days in order to either adapt to what our current circumstances are or just different ways to make the event better. And so what I was hoping to do tonight, while we'll talk through a number of things ranging from small decisions all the way up to the sort of broader policy discussion, what I really am hoping to get out of this is that sort of that broader picture. It's a little bit of like view for leadership, thoughts about like, is the event largely what you would want it to be? That kind of stuff. We don't need to get into all of the finer details this evening, but I do want to talk about them in case they help with that process. In addition to that, there are just a number of things that have been impacting staff that we just wanted to bring up. One of them being that as the event has really solidified as actually more than a week-long event, when you factor in all the block parties, this has over time really become quite a burden on our staff as far as how much time they're putting into these events, both on the day of the festival in the park, but also just the number of events that are going on where we have public works staff and other staff members who are participating in that. And so we definitely have an interest in making sure that if this is what we want, that we're aware of what the drain on those resources are. But if there is any interest in sort of reducing that event, that could have some positive benefits for our staff. Now, however, we know that there will always be and has always been a significant amount of involvement from our staff. Now, in the concepts of the things that we want to look at, sorry, it's not showing up on that screen, but that's okay. I can just look this way. So of the things that we kind of particularly want to talk about is one, the leadership of the event. What is the composition of the Harvest Days Committee? Up to this point, it has been volunteers from the community as well as staff. How and who is appointed to the chair of that committee? That has, for the last several years, been a staff member who has been chairing that and sort of providing the primary leadership of that event. But we can talk about if that's still the way we want it to be, or as I discussed over time, this event has changed significantly, where in the past there had been community volunteers who chaired that. We just want to get some of your feedback on that. In addition to that, as we look at the events that occur during Harvest Days, is this issue of, does the schedule sort of meet what your interests are? Is the lineup of events, is that currently what you think it should be? Could it be different? And then are there changes to the individual events that need to be made? And then we want to talk a little bit about city resources, the budget for the event. As I mentioned before, just for example, staffing, as the event has expanded, how there's more time commitment and overtime that is being paid for the event that doesn't always figure into the total budget. We want to talk about volunteerism, how we increase community involvement, and if you have thoughts on that, and as well as how we can better communicate with the community on the event. And then there's also issues of security. One of the things that came up over the course of this last year, for example, as we look at parades and other types of events like that, is the issue of there's been some of these occurrences where people are driving cars into events and that kind of stuff. And so, do we feel like it is sufficiently secure? Do you have any thoughts on if you didn't feel secure, so we know what those are? And then in addition to that, and I don't have a slide on it, is getting into a little bit more detail on the parade. There's a few things that are associated with that. The first one being we have to send our float and staff members to a number of parades every year in order to try to get other cities to participate in our parade and expand the number of floats that are occurring there. This is something that was particularly challenging this last year, given that those are often on holidays or on weekends, and so we're asking staff to commit more time, and that has been challenging. That program was also intended to incorporate our youth ambassadors were supposed to participate and ride on those floats, but we have not been seeing significant involvement from those youth ambassadors over the last 3 years. In addition to that, we are looking at renewing our float, getting a new float, and I'm actually going to have Laura come up and talk a little bit about what we're hearing from Modern Display about what that float will contain. And then that is a little bit of a new thing too, because we've actually never brought the float, or at least in the last 6 years, we haven't actually brought the float design concept to the council for approval. It's sort of just decided and is. Anyway, so this is a broad range of topics. We don't have to get into all of them because we will not be able to solve all of these issues tonight, but these are all things that need to be discussed as part of this item. Leading up to this, we have, while we've had different discussions over time with different groups that have participated in this, we've had some discussions with the Arts Council over the last year about some of the events that they have leadership in, you know, what they envision their role sort of being with the Arts Council, or with the Harvest Days, but they were not specifically consulted for this meeting, because what we're really hoping, again, is just to get back to these sort of broad concepts. What are your thoughts on the event and things that we could look at changing? What we come out of this meeting tonight with, again, being hopefully those broad policy decisions, will be things that will provide us with some guidance so that we could try to firm up the plans and sort of begin acting quickly on getting Harvest Days moving forward. Anyway, so that's kind of my hope, is that we'll have a little bit of guidance coming out of this meeting. So that is all the stuff I wanted to cover. My thought is, because some of the discussions that I've heard have largely been on what is that leadership of the group, I thought that might be a place that we could start and see what your guys' thoughts are on that. One last thing on that, just as a quick history. This is something that has oscillated back and forth between being run by a community member. It has been run by staff members, and it seems like it changes every 4, 5, 6 years back and forth over the last 20 years or so. So it's definitely not outside the norm if we were to change who who runs that event at this point in time. That was a lot. I'm sorry. It's probably a topic that, you know, this isn't necessarily the best venue for us to discuss, but with that setup, does anyone have any thoughts, questions, comments, concerns on the event?
Have we thought about, I think it's Draper, and they have like the Draper Days or something like that, and they have a completely separate entity who runs that. Is that something we've thought of? Because we do put a significant amount of money aside for Harvest Days, so I would think that if we would use that money, you know, to have like a professional type of, you know, that's their job, is to organize events like that, that we probably could, you know, use that money for that instead.
We have looked at different scenarios, but that is not one where there's an outside organization that is the primary manager of the event. We have not looked at that scenario.
Is there a reason why? Are you just trying to keep it more Midvale folks exclusively involved in the planning and organization of it? Because I would just say, honestly, you know, just there are people who do it professionally, and that might result in a better product than what we've had in years past. As long as, you know, we keep it focused in Midvale and, you know, keep the vendors, you know, with some sort of tie into Midvale as well, and the parade, you know, for Midvale. I don't see any problems with using some sort of, you know, outside company to run that. I mean, if we could find a company in Midvale who specializes in that sort of thing, that'd be great too. But I think that would very much alleviate a lot of the concerns that you're talking about as far as staff time, overtime, public works, all that type of involvement. Now, sure, public works will probably still have to be involved in some aspect or another, but it probably could be cut back significantly.
I think that's a great idea. I think there's two issues, and we'll have to look into that. One is that as looking at it as a long-term solution, and then is it something that we could get someone contracted and moving and all that kind of stuff for the 2022 event. Mm-hmm. But there was no other reason, and I hate when people say this, but it's just not what we have typically done in the past, and so we were just sort of looking at these versions of volunteer staff mixed kind of solutions. But I think that's a great idea.
Question is, how much would that cost? It's
Right.
definitely going to cost more.
That's right.
And so how much more? I mean, obviously, if we could get a volunteer committee that would actually do the job, that in Midville and Midville residents, that'd be the best of both worlds. The question is, it's really hard to do that.
And just so I'm clear, so we've got sort of, there's the two different roles, which is the members of the committee, of which we've had council members be part of that in the past. And so like Heidi last year was in charge of the food trucks, and other community members had different roles. And then there's the issue of the chair or the primary manager of the group. So when you're saying that, do you mean all of the above?
Yeah, I mean, that would be obviously the best scenario, but in past experience, we haven't been able to get, we've had some years way back that happened really well, and the same few group took over and they did it for years, and they did a really good job. But it's just really hard to find somebody that's committed, that's not really getting paid much to do this. I mean, we could look at ways of reducing the staff's involvement, like the community, when we have the neighborhood meetings, or, I mean, obviously, we could set it up to where just the city council goes, or we could have the city council and maybe one person from the city go with the mayor or something. We don't have to have everybody go to all of those meetings. And ideally, if we're going to cut a little bit, we'd have the city council person that has in his districts do his for sure, and then go from there. I mean, we can cut stuff down to make it so that it's not as burdensome, but you don't want to cut it out completely, because I mean, this is some of our staff goes out, they get an idea of what the citizens are talking about. So there is, even though it's putting a burden, it actually in some cases is helping the staff and the mayor and the council to know what our citizens are thinking. So I think that particular area is one area where we could maybe make it easier on the staff, but I don't think we want to do away with it, because I think that's really where we get the input. And if anything, I'd like to encourage to have more of them, but maybe we encourage them to have a bigger area, not so many. Maybe it's like in each district, we try to maybe have 2 or something and bring in the whole neighborhood instead of having this little block party on one street and the next street over has another one and another one. If we could have them somehow pull this together so that it makes it easier, because it's, even when I tried to get to all mine, but I tried to go to all the other ones too, and it's like, that was hard to get to everybody. It would be much easier if we could just get more people together. And I don't, we need to talk about how we might be able to accomplish that. But I think that's really important. I think the fireworks are probably the most viewed, and everybody likes that more than anything else on harvest days. And the parade is great, but I don't know that we have to have floats from other cities. I mean, it's nice to get involved with other cities, but I'm not sure that if that becomes a problem, then I'm not sure that we have to have that. But
I think it's hard to, if different neighborhoods want to have block parties, it's hard to discourage them from doing it. But maybe we could have just, I don't know, designated days, where we say District 1, Tuesday will be your day, and, something like that. But still, we shouldn't discourage. If every single street in my district wants to have a block party, I'll try to get to all of them, or prioritize the food menu.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't, but we could encourage. Say, hey, your neighbors next door, the street over is having a block party. Is there any way that you guys could get together and have one bigger block party?
Yeah.
I mean, then they get to know each other too. So there's advantages and disadvantages. But I'm not saying we say you can't do it.
Yeah. But, and I think as far as city staff goes, I mean, there are those amongst you who like going to them, and there might be others who, you know, it's kind of a requirement and they might not otherwise want to go. So, you know, I think as long as we still have, you know, some people going, I don't think everyone's interest, you know, if you tomorrow said, no one has to go to these ever again, it's not like everyone in the city would be happy with that. There are some people, I think Glenn might be one of them, who seems to enjoy going to block parties. So, you know what I mean? Like, I don't think we should require it of our city staff, but, you know, I think there are some, you know, you yourself in the city manager position should probably have an interest in, you know, showing up at some of them. So, and I think you would.
Yeah. And I think that, I want to be very clear. There's not necessarily any one of these events where we're saying, cut this out. It's more along the lines of saying that when we have multiple nights of block parties leading into Hall of Honors, then the bingo, and then into the Friday night concert, and then into the Saturday event, there's a subset of staff that basically is in every one of those, and that has been a challenge. So we're trying to see what your expectations are, and then when it comes to the block parties, I think one of the things is like the number of days has kind of fluctuated that we could do it. You know, we had some that were occurring like a week or 2 weeks before Harvest Days last year. And so like, you know, one of the things we're thinking of is could we say that the block parties have to occur, the official ones anyways, have to occur on the Monday, Tuesday. And we just know that it's not going to bleed into the next week or whatever, that kind of thing. And then like I said, as we talk about some of those other events, is if there was anything that we didn't feel as strongly about, you know, then maybe we could still have as many staff members going to the block parties if we were to say that, for example, the festival in the park didn't start until 3 o'clock in the afternoon or something like that. And then we wouldn't maybe need as many public works staff that are attending that. I mean, it's that kind of mix. And it's just sort of, I mean, part of this again goes back to like, if you all agreed that right now the block parties into the Hall of Honor, into bingo, into the concert, into an all-day park festival, if that's what Harvest Days is, then that's a discussion to have. But if there are parts of that where you're like, you agree that, like I said, we don't need it to be an all-day festival, or can we combine bingo and Hall of Honors in some way or something like that, then those are some things that we can kind of look at doing. And those would also have some ability to give some relief to staff members that have to attend everything too.
Oh, I like combining stuff. I think combining 2 or 3 things in one, you get more people attending and get more done that way. And I do like only having it in the afternoon all day is, it's not as well attended. If people are just a few people there, just have it start at a certain time and it gets over at a certain time and that's it. I think that's great. But I think we could put on most of the stuff if we just look at each specific thing. And like you say, the block parties, we only have them on 2 days and that's it. If they want to have a block party other than that, they can have it, but they're not going to have the police and fire and all the city council there.
I mean, I like that idea of trying to consolidate, you know, and simplify some of those things, because, I mean, we see it when we're going out to those block parties or, you know, at Harvest Days on Saturday. But we got to look at how many people are involved, you know, planning and the time that they're putting in, right? I mean, they're working a lot of those nights anyway.
Well, it's the same with just us. I mean, it's like the whole week is, I'm gone the whole week. I'm never home.
Right.
If I go to all of this stuff, you know.
Yeah.
So.
And there seems to be more block parties every year.
That's why I think that we specifically, you know, we do our own area for sure. And then if we have time and want to do more, great. But it's like whatever block party is in my district, that's what I'm going to really try to make.
Well, I'm definitely coming to your district for the Applewood. Because they have the best food.
They do.
Of all of them.
Oh, yeah, we had a band up in District 3.
Be there. Oh, okay.
We had quite
They
the
like
party
me.
going, so.
They like me over there too, so it's nice.
But Matt, one thing I've always wondered is, you know, the day of the park event, which is basically from 12 to 12, you know, a 12-hour ordeal. You know, you guys, you yourself, Matt and Kyle, you know, you guys are kind of managing some sort of event that I don't think is necessarily like, you know, the best use of your times, and I'm sure you guys might agree with that, to having you there that extended period of time. You know, if we had like an event management type of group, you know, that would be much more appropriate for them to manage those types of things. I would just put that out there. You know, having people, you know, like Laura, driving people around on the cart all day long, you know, that's great, and it's great that we have that service, but, you know, it doesn't need to be Laura or other city staff members doing that.
Thank you. I want to just go back on a couple of things that have been said to see if we all kind of agree, and then I got a couple other topics that we want to hit. So does everyone agree fireworks are key?
Key.
Key.
Okay.
I actually like the parade too. Sorry, I know that.
Well, yeah, the parade's fun. We have a lot of people.
I really like the parade, and in all honesty, I went to a couple of the other cities' parades, and I thought it was pretty cool to see our float. And I know it probably was a pain for staff to make all of those, but that's just my little note that I thought it was kind of cool to see our float in other city parades, and I also heard that our parade was one of the longest that was out there this year, which I thought was kind of a feat, because apparently a lot of cities really struggled to get their parades even together. So
That might be a good transition. I want to talk more about the parade, but Laura, would you want to talk about the float specifically?
So the float is actually an interesting topic because there's only one company now that does float building and designing, and that float is Modern Display, and they do a great job. So I met with them to talk about what our budget is, and they suggested that we use a float design that they had, I think it was in St. George. They said that the floats that are remembered the most, people say, "Did you see that Midvale City float?" is a float that is huge and everyone could see the whole big thing coming down the street. This is a train design, and it makes me think of that picture upstairs in the lobby up there. Which president was that? Does anyone know?
Rutherford B. Hayes.
Where a president was on the train tracks coming down Center Street. It's a really cool picture.
It's Roosevelt.
But this is the idea they had. They could use this big train that has already been designed and redesign it on our float and add the kind of theme that they were going for is the Disneyland Thunder Railroad ride. So they're going to try to make it look like that. They recommended that the character that they have to design that would be driving the fire engine, they recommended a groundhog. And the reason they said that is because of the fact, Groundhog Day, because of the fact that I told them, you know, we're known for beet diggers, mining, and they said, you gotta get some kind of animal that goes under the ground, so they thought of groundhog. I thought it was a cute idea. They also recommended, in addition to this, we could put postcards on the side of the float, and each postcard would represent something about Midvale City. Like we could have a postcard of someone skiing, and Midvale's part of the ski corridor. And we can have other different topics of Midvale on those postcards. The reason that I wanted to get your input on this is I don't like making the decision about the float, and I would love for your input on that. I think it's a great idea because we could get more bang for our buck if we use the train already. If we don't use the train already, they don't have any items that we could use. This is the last one they have. I want to take it up. I want to snatch them up, and I want to snatch it up before everyone realizes that they're the last company in town and they're already getting booked up. So what do you guys think about the train theme?
I like the train. I'm not sure about the groundhog.
Okay, that's fine. I'm open to ideas.
I'd rather have like a miner or something.
Okay, that'd be cool. A miner would be cool.
You know, it's Midvale. We're from the mining, the smelting, whatever.
Yeah, I like that, the Midvale Miner.
I would like to request that we get Councilmember Glover a mining suit. He can sit.
I do want to have a Midvale mascot, so
There you go. Councilmember Glover.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Do they give us a price on this?
Yeah, so the price is $24,000. So it's $12,000, it's a 3-year contract, so it's $12,000 to design the float, and then each year is $6,000 to refurbish the same float. And then in 3 years, we would get another float and have to do another contract.
That does get us through 3 years.
Yes.
I agree with Councilmember Glover. I like the train. I see like a very tenuous connection with mining, and I don't know. It's not really there for me, but I can see how it would relate to a blue-collar-y mining background, but definitely not. And this is coming from a Pennsylvanian. No, the groundhog, not so much. That's not. I mean, are there groundhogs in Utah?
I thought that too. I honestly
I've
don't
seen
know.
prairie dogs, which are their cousins, but.
Yeah, voles.
But
And
I mean,
really
it could
wanna
be
put
like
that on
a,
the train.
it could be like a cartoonish kind of miner, I
Yes.
guess. But
Yeah.
without being too offensive, I guess, too, as well.
My thought went where you're going as well. I don't want you. We really have to think it through. And is mining offensive?
Yeah.
It caused environmental damage to
Yeah,
Midvale.
I don't know
So-
about that too much. It's just we don't want a bumbling kind of fool of a miner.
Okay, I hear you. Okay.
I mean, we could think of some other, I just don't like the groundhog.
And then would it say something? Well, yeah, I don't like the groundhog either. I'm with you on that one. But the train itself, would it have something like Midvale related on the train, like all aboard the Midvale Express or something?
Yeah, we're thinking of going. I don't have the exact. I like that. I don't have the exact wording, but something about forward, moving forward, progressive Midvale. We are always forward. Something about that. Because we're continuously improving Midvale, so that's the kind of theme that I want to go with. I just got to think of a better phrase if any of you have
Full
one.
steam ahead or something.
Yeah, I like that. That's
You
a good
work
one.
that. You work that.
I like that. I love ideas. Glenn, did you have a question? No, it's the same float base.
That's good.
It's the same float base, and I've asked them to have 7 people be able to stand on it.
And then what would we do with our current float? Just drive it in the river?
No, they take that float base.
Okay.
We got
Oh,
the
gotcha.
base.
Just, okay.
And if anyone wants anything from that float, you can have it.
And I guarantee I've built 3 of these, and it's worth every penny that they're charging us.
I agree. They do, it's a good price, and that's their bottom price. So that's why I want to benefit from the train, because that's a good deal for us.
Sorry, I have to bring up storage.
Yes.
Currently, we store it, and the nose of it kind of hangs out in the weather. We could tarp it, but then there's the damage issue. There's animals living in it. No lie.
Groundhogs?
No. And we tried to store it at the Bowery, but the height is an issue.
Okay.
So just throwing it out there, when you look at size, take storage into account, because we do have to store it.
Are you saying, Glenn, though, that if it was the right height, the Bowery would be the optimal?
Correct. I am saying that for sure.
So,
Because then it would free up space at Public Works as well, because we're storing it in our yard.
so I did ask them about that. They usually work on floats in order of contract signed. This year, they're working on floats. The people who have insides, the cities who have inside storage, they're finishing theirs first. The cities that have outside storage, they're finishing ours as late as possible. The first parade is in June. We could deliver it at any time after we have the contract signed, which is going to be a while. What?
When's the last parade?
Um,
And then we store year round. That's the issue, so.
It's either,
It's year-round storage.
it's either us or, I think it's us.
Can they be wrapped like a boat, they
Yeah, I
wrap
was-
in these boats? With that plastic
Yes,
stuff?
yes, they can. So they do have a special wrapping that they will do for us. So they're gonna wrap it for us. I did ask them if we could store it year-round at their facility and how much that would cost. They don't have any openings right now, but they will let us know.
End of season, they do have a wrap option then.
Yes,
So
they do.
when parades are over, we
The
could get it
rates are included
wrapped.
with that wrap season, that wrap option, yes. I asked for that wrap.
That's good.
That might solve some of the problem.
So, yeah, I did ask for that wrap. And then as far as the actual floats that we participate in, last year we signed up for 11 parades. And it's kind of, honestly, it's a tit for tat. We're in your parade if you're in our parade. So I've narrowed that down. I'd be happy to give you the list of which ones I thought we should be in. But I just wanted to make sure, like West Jordan, we definitely want to be in because there was a lot of Midvale residents at that parade. The ones that are the most frustrating are Murray, Sandy, and Draper, and that's because it's 4th of July, and it's a hard weekend to get employees that want to show up, so I don't know if we want to be in those. Cottonwood Heights is a good one. It's July 27th, but is that Pioneer Day?
Probably, yeah. So I'll take the hit on the employee burden. That's a topic of mine.
Okay.
Public Works is on call quite frequently. They're plowing, they're doing water breaks. And then you add 11 parades in, which are all on a weekend, typically on a holiday. Those folks, they want to spend time with their families and take vacation and have that too. And the parades are a big burden on Public Works staff. So that's a lot of the staff burden.
What's the qualifications to have to run that thing?
Driver's license.
So we could get volunteers through the city. And that might be the way to go, is find some people that would volunteer to go do that.
I would assume Lisa might have some opinions on just the liability as far as like,
There would be things to work through.
yeah, like having some random community member drive in and they drive into a crowd of kids.
Liability too. City truck pulling it, yeah.
The challenge we had as well is getting people to ride the float. And that's something that we need to discuss.
Well, I think 11 is far too many. I mean, that's my opinion.
Laura,
Like, we should stick to the most immediate communities around ours, like Murray, Sandy, West Jordan, Cottonwood Heights.
That's what I had. I had Riverton, West Jordan, and Cottonwood Heights. The only reason I didn't include Murray is because it's 4th of July. But if we did one on 4th, I don't know, that's still.
Correct me if I'm wrong though, was it you that was telling me, or that told me, maybe the float company told you, that some of the Public Works folks, or some cities are actually ending parades because
Yes.
it's such a burden on Public Works. Did that come from you?
That came from me. That
Okay.
came from the Modern Display. They said that they've talked to a couple cities who are not going to be participating in outside
So
parades
I
because
think
of the
it's a
same
trend we'll
reason.
probably, just for,
And we've pulled out of Days of 47 because it takes up a lot of hours, 2 days almost, right, of time. So we've pulled out of Days of 47, and other cities are starting to do the same, sadly.
I would just say that if time's a concern, I agree with Councilmember Gettle that those communities directly, I mean, especially the ones that border us, I think you mentioned Riverton, I'm not as stressed about that because we're in different parts of the county, but I especially think the ones directly around us.
The ones we
Okay.
share borders with? Yeah.
Yeah, that's
I agree with
good.
that.
The only reason I picked Riverton is because they're on July 2nd. Okay, thank you for the input.
For the record, I'm happy to drive the float too.
Oh, that's good to
I already
know.
offered this to Matt, but he pretty much
You drive, I'll
denied.
ride on it. I'll tell Candy, I like to tell Candy.
Cool.
Yeah, you don't want me driving it.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, so, just what I got there was that, train good, driver needs to change, perhaps minor. And then, theme full speed ahead, maybe is something we need to consider. And then that we'll limit the parades to the adjacent communities, and the mayor will drive.
Thank you.
All right, so I want to come back, though, to, and Councilman Gettle, you've been good to talk about the hiring an outside party to sort of do some of the management activity. not knowing if that's how viable of an answer that is, particularly for this year. I did just want to kind of try to, and then Councilman Glover, you had said if we could get an all-volunteer group to be the head of that, sorry, I should say, no matter what, staff will be involved, right? I'm not trying to say that staff won't be involved, because there will be a role for Public Works, and we'll have to provide the funding, so there'll be someone helping with that management. But as far as being in charge of doing a lot of the stuff that Laura's done in the past, there's that option of going full volunteer, or trying to keep that still where the city has a primary role in that. I had heard, I believe, from some council members over the course of the last year that there was a interest in maybe it going to the full volunteer. So if the outside party management wouldn't work, do you have any additional thoughts on if that leadership should be still having a city staff member operating as the chair and then volunteers, or all volunteer?
In my opinion, all volunteer. City staff member could be on the committee just to offer resources and what the city can do and can't do. If we're gonna do this and do it right, you're gonna need to find somebody that'll do it for 2 years. Then you have a vice that'll move into the chair the next year, and so that we get continuate year from year. In other words, if you just get one person, he does it this year, and then he drops out next year, it never works. So you've got to have the same person for 2 years and just move the next person up and make it, that's the committee and that's the way it runs. And so you've got to get that commitment. You're going to do this for 2 years, or we don't need you.
Well, and I know
But I think there's enough people in the city that somebody would step forward and do that.
Yeah, and we've been very fortunate. I mean, Laura's been the chair for the past 3 years, 4 years, 3 or 4. But we've had a lot of community members involved as well. I think Stacy was the vice chair for a couple years. I'm sure, she'd probably, I shouldn't speak for her, but if she had the time, she probably would like to move into that kind of chair position. So I think we have the community members, but I also think that as long as it's that type of volunteer, like we need someone from the city to be on the committee and honestly to monitor the progress of, what's happening, because, the worst possible thing to happen is on the day of, the park, and it's a disaster, because no one's going to blame the volunteer committee. It's just going to be the city, elected officials and city staff who gets blamed for a product that's not so great. So if we have the volunteer, I think we still have to have very heavy city staff participation to make sure that committee is doing with our tax dollars what we want, as far as the product goes. So there's good and bad. I mean, obviously that volunteer committee costs nothing or very little in comparison to, a group to run it from beginning to end, but.
Thoughts on this end?
My involvement with planning, it was just last year, which was a little weird with the fire and smoke and all that. But that being said, I think volunteers to be consistent and show up was probably the hardest part. I think we had 3 that showed up to every meeting and everything, and that's hard to do. I mean, if we wouldn't have had Laura with not only having the experience, but being willing to shoulder that, I'm not sure with 3 volunteers if we would have had a bang-up harvest days. That being said, I think we need to rely on those volunteers a lot more, especially the ones that have shown, Stacy, once again, not trying to throw her under the bus or anything, but have shown a consistent effort to make it better. I think we should definitely rely on them. And then, I don't know, I think the community council is trying to do some rebuilding and some restructuring, but I also think we probably should see how much involvement they might want to have. They're not able to do their breakfast anymore with the COVID stuff changes, so they might actually want to look at being more involved in the planning, something like that. That's all I have. Just throwing ideas out there.
So, I'm sorry, say the last thing again.
Just throwing ideas out there. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that, if we're going to do the volunteer committee, that we need to seriously analyze what the community council is doing. I know they were very involved in the past, but the past few years have very little, if any, involvement in the planning of harvest days. So, you know, I've mentioned to you, Matt, and others before, I have some concerns about, you know, what they're actually doing, who's in charge, you know, that sort of thing. If we could get them to come to a city council meeting and present to us like the Arts Council does, that would be fantastic, because, you know, since I've not been the liaison, I honestly don't know what's going on as far as what events they have planned. You know, before they had events throughout the year, and I haven't seen much of that or any of that.
And I believe they consider themselves in a journey of self-discovery right
Hiatus,
now.
yeah.
Yeah, they're not active.
Yeah.
There were two at the last meeting, so they are in a rebuilding phase, so.
And that's an organization, it's not much, but, you know, we have city funds tied to that organization as well, so we could probably have a better accounting of activities and such.
I think one of the things is that whatever direction we're going to end up going is we're going to need to start moving quickly so that we can start scheduling.
For this year's event,
For this
for
year's
sure.
event. And I agree that there's probably a role for the community council, but given that I'm not sure when they will sort of be reconstituted, that might not be something that will be might not be viable as a particular help this year. If we were to, I'm hearing sort of this discussion again of volunteers and the importance of them. Is this something where if we were to put out a call to who wants to be on this committee, and then at least who would be the chair would be someone that, whether we did it like a mayor appointment to that position and the council confirmed it or something along those lines? At least
I
don't
like
know.
that,
Yeah.
actually.
I like that idea. Especially because it makes it like a more official kind of committee appointment rather than just, you know, some community, you know, volunteer-led. You know, anytime we can solicit more participation from the community in official roles, as I've mentioned with other committee ideas that I've had in the past, that I think those are the types of things that we should see more engagement. It sounds like, you know, that's what people have been asking for. And, you know, if we throw something like this out and there's no hits on it, then we kind of have our answer on that as well. So I think it's good on several different levels.
Lisa, you were going to shoot this down?
No, I need to think, or we need to organize it in such a way and consider wwhether or not it is subject to open meetings, that kind of thing.
yeah.
If we appoint someone and have it be a official city committee, there may be some just noticing requirements and that kind of stuff.
Which makes it even better, I think, just because it makes it official. This is,
Right. Yeah, I'm not shooting it down.
It's just,
Okay, so what I'm hearing is, let's look and see what our options are for the outside party to help. We want to focus on it being volunteer leadership, and we need to prepare sort of a package of what that would look like, because there would always be city involvement and what that relationship is between, because there's always going to be city involvement and city resources going into it and what that would look like. We'll explore the issue of sort of noticing and all that, and then we'll come back with what that package looks like. And then really need to sort of move after this next meeting on whatever that's going to be. In addition to that, we'll maybe reach out to a few folks too and sort of take a pulse on what people's interests are on this, as well as talking to some of the other community groups and see and get their feedback on that as well. Now, we've been at this for a while. I can tell by the way Juan was holding his head up with his hand. Just a couple other quick things real quick then is, we talked about events and consolidating them. Is there any other thoughts on the events that we currently hold other than sort of looking to consolidate? Are there any of them that you did not feel were necessary, or that there were unnecessary components to it, or room to improve or expand? Do you have any thoughts on any of that?
why not have the bingo in the Bowery? that's just, I mean, to be honest, it's not an event that I've ever really been interested in, other than watching the chief do his bingo calling. That's fun. But why not have that be a part of the Saturday in the park event instead of like its own little Thursday event? Uh-oh. Glenn's up to the mic.
Well, I was going to say, for my thought is, I'm not sure if I hear what you're saying on the Bowery, and there's some challenges now with the Bowery.
Well, you don't need to have it in the Bowery.
Right, but I was going to say, but I was thinking that
Wherever.
same thing about, is that something
Have it
that
at
we
the
could do on
community
that same
center
day?
as part of, from the community center from 2 to 3 p.m. during that day, bingo in the community center. I don't know. The marketing
Laura,
ideas
you
aren't
correct me if I'm wrong, but I think some of the spreading of the events is because we have to spread staff. Now you're going to have the chief and Laura, who were not doing bingo, now doing bingo on Saturday as well. I think I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah, and I think it's a good point. I mean, but I think that's if that is something that we could do, then we would try to see how we could structure the staff time around that. But it is one less night that we're doing stuff. But it's a solid point. Concerns with that idea?
You could have the Hall of Honors that afternoon at Saturday before the concert starts, or in between the concert, whoever you have or whatever. Could be done that same day right there.
Or throwing it out there, the Hall of Honors doesn't have to be part of Harvest Days at all. It can be another celebration for later or earlier in the year. No?
No, sorry, and because that is, while we do have staff that attend that event, it is largely an Arts Council event, and we would definitely have to discuss with them if there was any potential changes with that. And it is an unfortunate discussion to have too without Bryant here, unfortunately, too.
And they have actually already started accepting applications for this year, so I don't think for this year moving it would be a good idea, but.
I guess what we're saying is look at all of these things and see what
consolidation is
consolidation might look like. I think
Perfect.
that's really what we're saying.
Any other thoughts on, we'll wrap this up, but one of the things was just security. Are we good with how things have been operating? Have you had any concerns or anything like that we would need to incorporate? I don't know that you would, but just feeling that out.
It seemed pretty safe to me.
I didn't have any concerns.
I don't think we need any sniper rifles or anything.
Okay. There's a lot of direction here. Laura, is there anything specifically that I am forgetting that we had discussed that we? Yeah. I really appreciate your discussion on this evening. I think this was a lot of really good direction, and I think that'll give us something to work with. Of course, if you have any other thoughts on this, please feel free to share them, send me an email, give me a call, whatnot, and then we'll work on coming back to you with a more detailed package at the next meeting.
Matt, I have one thing to say. I'm happy to be involved with the Harvest Days Committee. I would recommend as well if at least somebody from the council, and I know Hattie, you did that. But I do think as there are resident complaints, I think it's a positive to have somebody who is in an elected position be able to speak with them and not put that on staff or onto volunteers.
Yeah, and we've always had at least one council member who's appointed to that committee, and I think, Bryant and I were appointed to it together, so we had 2 on it a few years ago, and Heidi's been that committee member the past few years, so.
I'm happy to stay on that, by the way, just so it's out there. I actually really enjoyed it.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you. But don't go anywhere, Matt, because you're up next. Our next discussion item is discuss bike lane parking issues.
Do you guys want people to park in bike lanes?
No.
Sorry, I got a little bit more to it than that. So just really quickly, it was recently brought up to us that by Councilman Gettle that he was seeing that over in his neighborhood that we had people who were parking in the bike lanes and wanted us to have a discussion about that. It, on the surface, seems like a fairly simple idea, but I wanted to just bring up a couple of other ideas before we make a final decision on this, or recommend that we draft up the policy on it. The first thing is that we have in Midvale a limited number of current bike lanes that exist. The majority of our bike lanes is probably technically the Jordan River Trail, but we also have bike lanes that are on Ivy Drive and on Bingham Junction Boulevard. This is what the Ivy Drive bike lane looks like. The one thing to sort of point out here is that you will see that there is a little bit of space between the curb and where the bike lane is at that is sufficient for a vehicle to park there. Where we do have a little bit of more of a challenge is that on Bingham Junction Boulevard, of which a lot of the area isn't currently allowed for parking anyway, not because of the bike lane, but just in general, the bike lane is the shoulder effectively. And that is not necessarily the best design. And so as we look at whatever we want the policy to be with regards to parking in the bike lanes, we do have to sort of factor in like what are the different ways that we can design our bike lanes. In the general plan, we have this map that shows all of the different areas where back in 2016, we thought that we would be able to have bike lanes in the city. One of the things is that if we just did an outright ban on parking in bike lanes, as this network expands, we would really have to consider what the design of that bike lane is, because if we were to do sort of the shoulder bike lane, there are some parts of the city where we could really impact those neighborhoods by preventing parking to occur. Now, subsequent to the general plan and where we identified the active transportation routes, the council has approved the Mid-Valley Active Transportation Plan. That has sort of different steps of where these bike lanes would go. But you can see on there is the proposed backbone network that was included in that plan, and sort of the areas of the city where that would potentially impact us. So again, just as we're thinking about the policy and knowing that we're planning on expanding, what kind of impacts would it have? Right now, we've looked at several different cities to see what type of bike lane policies there are. The first thing is that while the driver's handbook for the state of Utah does say that no one should park in a bike lane, we were unable to find in there a specific prohibition in state code of people parking in bike lanes. Bike lanes? Did I say bark lanes?
It sounded like it, yeah.
In bike lanes. Again, we looked at several different communities, and 4 of the 7 did have restrictions on parking in bike lanes. Currently, Midvale does not have that prohibition, although we do have the ability to restrict parking for whatever reason it is that we see, and we have done that before. So even if it wasn't a matter of saying that we wanted to block parking in bike lanes, we could look at blocking in certain streets if that were necessary. As I mentioned before, primarily our bike lanes are comprised of striped bike lanes, with the exception really of the Jordan River Trail. And we would say that if our goal is to make sure that we're protecting those bike lanes, what we really want to do is kind of look and say, we don't have to make that decision today, but it is something where in order to make those bike lanes more effective, we have to look at different methods different types of bike lanes. As we go through here, we've got the conventional bike lanes. This is an example of what we've got. You're also all familiar with the green lane where you put the bike lane in an active transportation lane. That's the example that has the Long Beach, California title on it. There's also things called buffered bike lanes. This is, again, largely just something where you just change the striping on a street and you create a larger area between where the travel lane is and where the bike lane is. This kind of change would have a significant impact on the cross-section of our streets and would have a potential fairly not inconsequential budget impact. But again, as we're expanding our network and we want to protect the bike lanes, make them usable and safe, we'll probably need to look at these kinds of improvements in the future. And then the most expensive one that we can look at is the one-way protected cycle tracks. There are some of these in Salt Lake City, but again, this is where you're going to put physical barriers between the bike lanes and the streets. There is no option for people to park in those, but again, this is the most expensive and would have the most significant impact on the transportation patterns of our city. So the questions that we just need to talk about before we get to the end, although I have a suspicion I know where we're going to go with this, is would a ban on parking and bike lanes increase the overall safety in Midvale streets? I know to cyclists that's automatically, the answer is yes. The reason I ask the question though is that, again, as we look at it as an expanded network in the city, if this is the policy that we're setting, could it cause people who are parking on the street to park in ways that are unsafe in the future? Just something to consider. The next would be, would a ban on parking and bike I keep saying bark lanes. It's because I look at Dustin and then I know that the next month I have to talk about dogs again. Would a ban on parking and bike lanes lead to more residents riding bikes in Midvale? Would it contribute to more people using active transportation network in the future? How would a ban on parking in bike lanes impact neighborhoods that current and future bike lanes pass through? Would the reduction in parking be a problem for those neighborhoods? Should there be different policies for different type of bike lanes if we're agreeing that that is something that we want to do going forward in the future? So again, right now, if we were to ban parking in the bike lanes, it's a relatively small impact as of today. It is something that we could approve today, and as the bike network expands, if there is a reason that we need to modify the policy, we can do that. But we do need to think about not only today, but in the future when we're setting this policy. With that, Keith, is there anything else that I should add to that?
Just,
if you have something you want to come up. That's fine.
I still can't talk. Maybe I need something stronger than water.
She's got that.
As Matt mentioned, the only really striped bike lanes we have are along Bingham Junction Boulevard, south of Center Street, and Ivy Drive, west of 700 West. Bingham Junction Boulevard in that section is posted as no parking. Ivy Drive, of course, isn't. And as I've noticed, cars parked there, they do or can, park into the park in the bike lanes. I was gonna say park in the bark lanes. And as Matt mentioned, right now, that would be fairly easy and really wouldn't impact a whole lot of people. But then moving forward, as our bike lane network expands, then what does that do? Most of our city streets obviously are, built. We only have a certain width to work in unless we spend a lot of money and buy more right away and reconfigure the street. So adding bike lanes in a lot of cases may prevent parking on the street if that's the way we go.
So with all that, comments, questions, thoughts? And then again, this is going to be the basis for if the direction is to go the route of writing up the policy, that will go that way.
I like the last one, different policies for different types of bike lanes.
Yeah, if there's room to park on the side of the road and leaving the bike lane completely unobscured, then I don't love it, but that seems to be fine to me. But I think we could make it as simple as like a car, like no part of a car should touch a bike lane, and if it does, it's parked illegally. And that's as simple as you can make it, I think. If there's room on the right, park there, or left, I guess. But yeah, I don't think that any part of a car should be in a bike lane, or else it's not a bike lane, it's a car lane.
Keith, do you know if on Ivy, I was in that area last week or so, and I happened to be in that area and was thinking about the bike lane conversation, and there was a car there, and I think the car was against the curb, but still in the lane.
in the bike lane.
Yeah, that it was,
And
it
that's
wasn't a
been-
blur, it was just a regular type of car.
That's kind of been my experience too, Mayor, as I've seen vehicles parked along Ivy, is that they're as close to the curb. I, obviously didn't get out and measure their, are they touching the curb or whatever, but it seemed like if they were parked basically where you would park in the shoulder, they were also obstructing the park. God, now you got me saying bike lane.
Yeah,
They were also obstructing the bike lane.
I don't think on Ivy there's any spot where, I mean, you could be like halfway in both, but I don't think there's a way to be all the way out of the bike lane.
Correct.
So part of your car would be touching, even if it's, a tiny part of it.
And right now, I don't know how many residents park there. It seems like the Wasatch Development Apartments seem to have plenty of parking. I think, from what I've seen, most of the parking has probably been construction workers working on the vacuum sewer station. So doing this, no parking in a bike lane ban, probably wouldn't affect the residents at all. And then the construction workers, could, there's plenty of room in that area, especially now that it's getting a little bit warmer and drier and it's not so muddy. It's not obviously the best place to go, parking, driving through that, but I think as far as residents concerned, it probably wouldn't affect the residents in a big way right at this point.
What I've noticed is that the apartments, I always forget the name of them, and that's a shame because I can see them from my balcony, but yeah, the reserve. So those who live in the apartments that are like on the corner of 7th West and Ivy will park in the bike lane just to get to their apartments quicker. So, yeah, I don't think there's a huge residential impact yet, but, as we get a few hundred more units there pretty quickly, it could become an issue very fast, and that's what I would like to prevent if at all possible. And if it comes to a point where we decide we need more parking, then that's, another issue entirely as well. But in my opinion, if we have bike lanes, as you can see, we have signs as well that says this is a bike lane, then having cars parked in it defeats the purpose entirely. So, I'm of the opinion that if we're more concerned about parking, then, we reconsider our commitment to having dedicated bike lanes entirely. I think we either need to do one or the other. I prefer having bike lanes and having them unobscured, but I'm just saying there are other options for us as a council. If we don't think that that's a priority, I would highly recommend against that. But still, I think it just sends a mixed message, to say that we have pedestrian and bike traffic factored into our long-term city plan, but, allowing cars to park there kind of sends a mixed signal in that regard.
So I hear
I agree with Dustin. If you're gonna have bike lanes, we need to have them open for bikes. Otherwise, there's no sense in having a bike lane.
Thoughts on this, Ed?
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't understand having them if they're just gonna be chock full of cars. It doesn't make any sense.
One last just question, and I want to double check, because I thought you could park on the curb and be
I think this
between the bike
particular
lane.
picture, the orientation of it is a bit misleading because it does look that you could park where the curb kind of curbs there.
So if you could, if we verify that a person could do that, do you feel any different? And I know this is going to sound like a silly question, but like if a person could, when they open up their car,
Courtesy rental.
Thanks, Benjamin.
What do we got here?
I take back what I was saying.
Okay.
I think Dustin's right. I think this is probably a picture taken where we're approaching an intersection, so the curve is probably widening out, but this is probably more typical of what Ivy is.
Okay.
How hard is it to do those where you showed where they have like the green strip and they're with the traffic? I mean, is that really expensive to do?
No, it's probably, yeah, it's the most
I mean, obviously.
easiest go-to.
Obviously, it's not the ideal, but I'm not saying here, but throughout our city, that's possibly what we're gonna have to do if we're really gonna have some bike lanes in some of the areas.
And I think too that even as we look at like a long stretch where we will have a future bike lane, is that you can switch between types too, right? Like it could be for some reason, if it's a tight area, you could be the green stripe in the drive lane, and then in a different section, it's possible too that for some reason there's more right-of-way, and you could maybe make it more of a, in some form, a protected bike lane, and then it could kind of come back in. Those are things we'll talk about in the future too. But yes, the green line is the simplest, but it obviously provides no additional real protection for anyone. But that is the next step. Vendeline is our resident active transportation expert, and any good idea I get will come from him and Keith on any of this. But do you have any thoughts on the green stripe?
There are a few places in Utah that use the green stripe. For example, in Salt Lake City on South Temple, I believe, there's one. I mean, it's an interesting idea, but it doesn't really give the bicycle an extra, really unique space that's just for them. It's more sort of a tool to maybe make drivers more aware. And it can work if you are in a very low speed environment. Otherwise, it's maybe not the most useful thing. But
Well, obviously, it's not the best.
yeah, but there's quite a few nuanced tools one can use. It doesn't even, if it's the right context, necessarily have to be a bike lane. There are all sorts of other principles at work. Some communities have tried what are called, sometimes they call them bicycle boulevards. They're basically oftentimes neighborhood roads that are traffic calmed. So there are all sorts of tools. It doesn't always necessarily require additional right-of-way. It just sometimes requires a different view of what we want to do with the right-of-way at hand.
And obviously, that's what we're gonna have to look at is different ways, because we're not, if we were building all brand new streets and we had all the room we had, we could do it really easy, but we don't have that option. Right. So we're gonna have to look at ways to make it, if we're really gonna do this, we gotta look at the best ways in each area. That's why I say the bottom one is like, let's determine what the road can handle. But I still think that if you're gonna have a bike lane, you've gotta try to keep it open as best as possible, because if you don't have it open, then they're gonna be riding out in the street anyhow, so.
Yeah, I agree. And with these particular bike lanes on Bingham Junction and Ivy, the reason that they're there and were dedicated as bike lanes is because this bike traffic is gonna go, hopefully, to the Jordan River Trail, which is going to connect, through the intersection at Ivy and Bingham Junction at some point, hopefully. So, this is obviously, a good area to start. I don't know in other areas of the city, other than maybe Center, where, bike lanes have even been discussed as an option. So, obviously, where we have them now is where we should focus our energies as far as how we want to regulate them or not regulate them.
So I'm hearing, and I know the base question, should people be able to park at bike lanes, is pretty easy, but I did want to have just a little bit further discussion about these options like all of you have brought up. And so I appreciate that additional discussion. But what I am hearing is let's come up with a policy to prevent people from parking in bike lanes.
I think you got it.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Well,
This has been much faster than 2 weeks ago.
I want you to know that I listened to every minute of that last meeting I wasn't here.
Oh, boy.
I did break it up into 3 tranches. Motion? You ready?
I'm ready.
Motion to adjourn.
If you listen to it, did it pick me up at one point?
Yes.
When I said,
Going off
I
rails?
said, Councilmember Glover's not here. We're never gonna adjourn. We're gonna be here all night.